This is a Hot Pie Media original.
All right, there are career changes. Then there's this man's move, going from the tech industry to the cannabis industry in the state of Texas, no less, is not your usual career jump. But Morris Denton is the chief executive officer of Compassionate Cultivation. That is a Texas-based medical cannabis company. From what I understand, the only Texas licensed medical cannabis company. Before we get into the business itself, how does a guy go from not so progressive places like AMD and IBM to medical cannabis in the state of Texas?
I guess I'm just lucky. I mean, look, I think that one of the things that's important in life, and certainly one of the things that I try to coach up my kids on is to keep an open mind, and if you do that, then you never know where the turns and twists in life may take you. And I can tell you that the years that I spent in the tech industry were great years. I'm very fond of those memories, and I learned an awful lot. And the things that I learned there, I'm bringing to bear in the creation of the medical cannabis industry here in Texas.
So not just, is there an effort by, and maybe you're going to have to lecture the rest of us on the separation between medical cannabis and recreational. But I mean, bringing in people like you it's putting a legitimate and professional face to the industry. Was that intentional, or is it just, did you and others like you with great business backgrounds grab a hold of it yourself? Or did they come seeking people like you saying, you know what, we've got to have a different face, certainly in the state of Texas. We have to have a technical face in the state of Texas.
I don't know the answer to that. I think that there's, if you look across the cannabis industry, there's a wide range of experiences and backgrounds that have, come to fruition and into play in leadership positions. For the state of Texas, we spent, when Senate Bill 339 got passed in 2015, which would enable an industry like ours to exist. I spent the majority of 2016 doing due diligence, really trying to answer two key questions. And the first was, did I think that Texas would have the political will, right, the courage to go from a very narrowly crafted industry that would only allow for, frankly, a business to exist to lose money, into, a pacing and into a space that would follow the 30 other so states that have preceded us down this path, where you would kind of add over time to the mix. And if I thought that that was possible, then what would be the conditions that would likely improve or accelerate the odds around that? And that, frankly, was, a really key kind of point of my diligence, which was, hey, look, if we create a business that can be run with integrity, that can be run with transparency, that creates a real professional environment in the state, then we're only increasing the likelihood that the state is going to have confidence in how we run our business, and therefore give us the ability to expand. And so, when we got our license, when we won, we were one of 43 businesses, Jeff, that competed for what ended up being 3 licenses that were awarded. When we got our license, we soon thereafter created, 3 operating tenets, which since that point in time have really defined and filtered almost every decision that we've made as a business. And the first is to create the highest quality, best in class medicine that changes people's lives. And then the second is to operate our business with transparency and integrity as a reflection of the values of the state of Texas, which would ultimately lead to the third, which is to create a business that can be self-sustaining in return on the investments from our investor community, but also from our employees. And, that second operating tenet is critical in an industry like cannabis, where, right or wrong, good or bad, there's a sort of a perceived skepticism or stigma associated with it. And the only way that I know how to address those skeptics is head on, right? And you do it in a very professional, matter-of-fact manner, hopefully through a dialogue, but also, by proof, by demonstrating what we do and how we do it, and letting our patients and the medical community tell our stories.
So, Morris, exactly, just so, because a lot of us don't even know exactly how it works. So exactly how does it work?
Exactly how it works. So,
I have whatever, and you can give a perfect textbook example of how your industry works.
Okay, so from a patient's point of view, it's the following: you have a condition, and let's assume that condition is an eligible condition. And currently, those eligible conditions consist of PTSD, all forms of cancer, spasticity, MS, epilepsy and other seizure disorders, autism, and then this pretty large bucket of things called incurable neurodegenerative conditions, of which there are several hundred, frankly, fairly rare conditions that would be eligible. So you have an eligible condition. Then the next thing is you need to find a doctor that is a registered physician on the Compassionate Use Registry of Texas, otherwise known as CURT. Okay, let's just call it CURT. And if the doctor is a participating doctor and the doctor sees you, he validates that you have a condition, then he or she can write you a prescription for medical cannabis, right? And typically that prescription is written in a very specific dosing manner, in a very similar fashion to how you would be prescribed any other medication. Take X number of milligrams twice a day, whatever. And that gets entered into the Compassionate Use Registry. At that point in time, then the patient can call us or one of our two other competitors and say, hey, I've got this prescription from my doctor and I'd like to fill it with you guys. And then we say, okay, great. Let's ask a couple questions. We ask a couple questions to identify who they are, much like a pharmacy would, right? And then we say, yeah, you do have a prescription with us. We put you into our system and then we set you up for delivery, or you can come pick it up at either our location in Austin or at one of our pickup locations throughout the state. So that's how it works for the patient. And then for the doctor, it's pretty similar because it's, hey, I'm a doctor. I want to know more about medical cannabis. They have to get registered and then they have the ability to write prescriptions and to treat their patients. Now, from a business operator's perspective, it's a lot more complex because the regulations are pretty interesting. But that's how it works from a patient and prescriber.
Right. Okay. So growth, number of people getting prescriptions for any number of, because the number of diseases and ailments is increasing, correct? Didn't that just happen in legislative session that they actually opened the door for a few more diseases that meet the standard you just described? But are more people getting prescriptions and are more doctors getting into whatever category? And by the way, how would I, if I said, I'm a young neurologist and I want to start writing scripts for medical cannabis, what do I do?
Yeah.
Go to a class?
Yeah. Let me answer the first question.
Okay.
And then I'll circle back to the how do I get engaged? The first question is a yes to both, right? Like since 2017, when we got our final license, which was on October 31 of 2017, we planted our first set of seeds that day. We sold our first medicine on February 8th of 2018. Back in 2018, we used to celebrate when we served, 50 patients in a month, right? It was like really slow, early, hard days, right?
Wow.
With the education.
50 in a month?
50 in a month. We'd celebrate 50 patients in a month,
wow.
Jeff. And those 50 in a month wouldn't just be in Austin. You might have one patient that's up in the Panhandle and one patient that's down in the Rio Grande Valley, and we'd have to get their medicine to them. And the only way we can get it to them is by delivering it, by driving it ourselves. I personally have made, long road trips over holiday weekends to far-flung places in Texas to get patients their medicine. So we used to.
You ever get pulled over?
Our drivers have.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And the police will ask them, hey, what are you doing? We'll tell them. And 100% of the time, Joe, 100% of the time, when the police find out what we're doing, they're like, that's awesome. We love hearing that. We love what you guys are doing. Keep doing it.
Okay.
Seriously.
The growth.
So the growth. So, 50 in a month. And now we're at, now we see several thousand in a month. Right?
Who were what kind of patients were the early 50? Describe who those people were.
They were all epilepsy because that was the only eligible condition.
Yeah.
It was intractable epilepsy, which essentially meant incurable epilepsy. And let me tell you something, Jeff, when I would go on these deliveries, I mean, when you walk into the house of a family member who has epilepsy, I knew it. I mean, you just walk in and you just feel it, man. And everything that's happening around that house is all in the lens through helping the person with epilepsy in that house. And when for me, when I would walk in with these, I mean, I'll never forget driving down to Edinburgh, which is down in the Rio Grande Valley, and delivering some medicine to a family. I walk in and the mom hugs me and starts crying, and I'm just like, oh gosh, because it grounds you, or at least it grounds me in a way that no other business had, no other experience had. And it's just a phenomenal,
what would cannabis do? What, just scientifically, to use her story, what was cannabis do that the other pharmaceuticals couldn't do?
Either eliminate seizures or reduce the intensity and duration of those seizures. I mean, at this point, Jeff, we've got hundreds of stories from people with epilepsy. One of our stories is this incredible young woman named Julia, who came down with a seizure disorder when she was 5. And then for the next 10 years, she had hundreds of seizures a day. Hundreds of seizures a day. Her life, Jeff, was defined by what she couldn't do.
Yeah.
She couldn't go to a normal school. She couldn't go to summer camp. She couldn't have sleepovers with her friends. She couldn't think of getting a driver's license. She couldn't dream of going to college. She couldn't, right? I mean, can you imagine if that was one of your kids where, we want to think, I mean, fortunately, I'm a man of solid health. My family's healthy. And so you want to dream big and you want your family to dream big. And yet they were, limited by this unfortunate condition. And they had tried every other anti-seizure medication that was out there. They had been on a cocktail of chemicals. They were on medication to treat the side effects from anti-seizure medication. She had, it was just this litany. And then we come along and she gets on our medication. And she comes off of all the other medications and she's been seizure free. She started with us when she was 15, which was 4 years ago. She became valedictorian of her high school. She got her driver's license. She graduated, as a valedictorian, and then is on an academic scholarship in the honors program at Texas A&M. And this past legislative session, she was the youngest registered lobbyist in the state of Texas on this issue because she believes in it so much. And that's one of hundreds of stories.
Okay, so you go from 50 to like what is a month like now in terms of prescriptions?
So several thousand. There are, approximately since day one, if you go to the DPS's website, who's our regulator, you go to their website and they publish data around the number of doctors that are involved and then the total number of patients since day one. There are more than 500 doctors at the end of last month, and more than 16,000 patients since day one. So, just objectively speaking, for a state the size of Texas with approximately 30 million people, to have 16,000 patients in the program is, it's small. It's very small, and it's still nascent, and we're still growing it. But we're encouraged by what we're seeing in terms of patient growth and acceptance. We really think.
What about the number of doctors?
500, more than 500 doctors.
Is that growing?
That grows. Okay. That grows. 20 to 30 a month. Yep. And look, at some point, this is kind of like when you look at markets just in general as a business perspective.
Right.
You got this. There's this. Remember that old business book, Crossing the Chasm, or whatever?
Yeah.
I can't remember in the 80s. I used to have all these books on my wall, right?
Yeah. But now you got cool bikes.
Well, yeah. hey, you got to stay somewhat healthy.
I'm admiring them.
But we're at the point where the market is still really, really small. But at some point, we cross over that chasm and get into.
How though? What is like? Yeah, what takes you from 16 to 60?
More awareness, right? I think that there's a lack. I mean, look at you. You didn't know that this program really even existed, and yet you spend your life, your career in the media and understanding what's happening from an industry perspective in the state of Texas. So there's a lack of awareness that's out there, but there's also still a constriction on the eligible conditions.
That is another fascinating part. And I assume you took the job and they wanted you, or you wanted them, knowing that there are significant barriers to entry and there's probably significant barriers to existence. Who doesn't want you to make it? Who doesn't want you going from 50 scripts to 50,000? Who wants to knock you off and shut you down?
There are industries that are out there that are probably looking at the cannabis industry, the medical cannabis industry, with hesitation, with pause, and that could be the pharmaceutical industry. It could be the beverage industry. We have not crossed paths with those guys, aside from like charity golf tournaments and stuff like that. And they didn't seem to, be concerned with us. There is there is an old sort of attachment to some long held, beliefs and falsehoods that, unfortunately are serving as ballast that kind of weigh down the state's ability to move forward. And that's really, around the skepticism and stigma associated with cannabis.
Is that coming from medical? I mean, is there a segment of the medical? It would make perfect sense that if I were a pharmaceutical company that had an anti-seizure drug and you come along, I'm going to fight for my turf, and I either beat you or I buy you, right? You know that. Is there a segment of the medical population that's saying, no way, no how, this is quackery, I'm not in? Or is there more of Grandma at Beeville Baptist Church who's saying, no way, this is terrible? There's
a lot of the Beeville Baptists,
really,
right? That's out there. I mean, yeah.
Aren't they? Wouldn't that be the very person that you'll be serving?
Of course. I mean, look, here's the thing: is that there is, from a medical perspective, when we go out and we meet with doctors, a lot of what we hear is, can you show us the science? Can you show us the evidence? Can you show us the research papers? Can you show us the clinical trials? And oftentimes we can. Absolutely, we can show them that. Unfortunately, because this has been a federally illegal substance for decades, it has led to a broad inability for there to be real clinical trials conducted by Tier 1 medical schools in the United States because it's federally illegal.
Yep.
And yet the science exists that proves medical cannabis is an effective form of treatment for a wide range of conditions that go well beyond what the current approved eligible conditions are. And then when you dig into it in Texas and you start looking at what we have done over the last 4 years, we are delivering the science every single day, as evidence through the work that we do with our patients. And science, I'm a big believer in science, man. You know what science is? It's proof of the truth. It's proof of the truth. And that proof exists right here in Texas, as evidenced through Julia Patterson and thousands of other patients just like her. And so, there's this tipping point, right? Again, this whole crossing the chasm, tipping point, all this stuff, right? Where we're getting to where it's becoming extraordinarily evident. And you asked me earlier about how do they wrap their heads around all this? We offer monthly webinars led by one of our medical advisory board members that walks doctors through the education, the background, the science, the evidence around medical cannabis, and how to go about diagnosing, prescribing based on symptoms for their patients. And so it's just, man, it's just hard.
So the force pushing back on you. I mean, if you have to sort of weigh those forces, is it? I'll use the Baptist Church again, but you know what I'm talking about. Old school Texas, Reefer Madness crowd. Is it just that voting block says You hippies in Austin, no way. Is it that, or is it pharmaceutical? Which one of them is, if you could convince one of them to back off, which one of them would it be? The pharmaceuticals or the church crowd that says it's Reefer Madness?
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't know that it's fair to sort of bucket it in those two categories and leave it at that. I think that there's a sort of a wide spectrum across sort of a, fairly significant beachhead that looks at it with skepticism, right? And is, I mean, look, we all arrive at a moment in time based upon all of our collective personal experiences, right? Yours are different than mine. If you grew up in, part of Texas and you have been told throughout your entire life, and let's say you're an old white guy like me, you've heard this over and over and over again, Reefer Madness, cannabis is a gateway, all that other stuff, then, that's going to be pretty firmly held belief. And then all of a sudden you get presented these facts, and they are facts, around the science of cannabis. And the impact of medical cannabis on improving people's lives in a substantial and defensible way. If you're a person that doesn't want to take that in, then it's easy for you to bury your head in the sand, right? If you are a person, however, that is willing to listen and willing to engage and take in those new facts, then all of a sudden you have the opportunity to shift your perception. And that's one of the reasons why we identified that second operating tenet around operating with transparency. We invite legislators, we invite their staff. We've hosted a lot of legislators and their staff at our facility because we know that if we can get them in our facility and they're going to have an open mind about it, that we can completely change and transform their perspective on this issue.
If the laws at the federal level changed about cannabis, would that open up the world for you? John McClellan is the co-founder and creator of Atx Hot Sauce, now in all 50 states and several retail outlets as well. So what we're going to do today is we're going to let this social media rock star chef walk us through 4 different sauces, and then I'll taste and we'll tell everyone why they should buy. You can give the science behind these, and then I'll make the simple recommendation. Go to atxhotsauce.com. All right,
I don't think anybody's heard the website.
Yeah, I know.
By you, Jeff,
I've never heard that.
It is atxhotsauce.com.
I'll say
I got that one right.
45 times, atxhotsauce.com. So let's do it.
I brought 4 flavors here, and we're going to test your palate today.
Okay.
And I only brought 4 because I didn't think you could handle 5 or 6.
Yes,
probably a smart move. Yeah. And so the first one we're going to try here, it's called Beet Heat. And just like the name implies, it has beets in it. It's made with red Fresno peppers. Red Fresnos are red peppers that are they're hotter than a jalapeno and a little bit less than a serrano. So not super hot here, just a lot of really good flavor. So we're going to start with this one, and then we're going to move up the chain.
Okay. I've had the Beet Heat, but okay.
Yeah, we're going to try it though.
It goes well with a cab. All right, Jeff's savoring Beet
I'll
Heat.
even do it with you, so that should be all right. Now remember, it is hot sauce.
Yeah. Oh, it is. It's hot sauce. Trust me, man.
Wait, is that one hot to you?
No, a little.
Yeah. The great thing with the fermentation process is you get a bunch of the flavor right up front.
Yeah.
And then the heat comes, but then it dissipates pretty quickly, especially with the red Fresnos. This is not a very spicy one, but it is a very tasty one. Goes on great on sandwiches.
Beet Heat.
Beet Heat. B-E-E-T. Heat.
All right. Go to atxhotsauce.com.
That's right.
Sure. I mean, look at what happened with the hemp program in Texas after the feds passed the Hemp Farm Bill in 2018. In 2019, Texas passed its version of the hemp program, and that market has since exploded. So, yeah, I mean, the question, look, Biden, as part of his campaign, said that he was going to decriminalize cannabis and that he was going to legalize medical cannabis. Well, we're now a little more than 1 year into his journey, and he hasn't made any, sort of advances on those campaign platform issues. We anticipate that he will at some point in time. And if they legalize medical cannabis, then that will have a big impact, right? Because then all of a sudden it will create the air cover for Texas to be able to move forward. That said, I still think that Texas is going to continue to improve the program in every legislative session for the foreseeable future, regardless of federal change.
Yeah, but I mean, it's still cash business, though, correct?
Yeah, it's hard. It's
Oh
hard.
my God.
It's hard business.
So
to
do your
check.
drivers going around with a bunch of cash?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, look, I'm not going to tell that. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mean that. I'm just saying, just the what did antiquated, absurd. I mean, whether it's you or recreational cannabis, the fact that the business can only exist on cash is laughable.
It is an extraordinarily complex and challenging business to operate, and to do so consistently and effectively because of the federal challenges, because we can't get, I mean, just, Jeff, look, starting this business, right? Me and 4 other guys founded the company. We put in, collectively a, pot of money to kick it off, but there was no way that we could capitalize it out of our own pockets. We had to go out and raise money from investors. And when you have a hard time, fortunately, we found a bank in Austin that was willing to bank us, but that was like job one.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of banks that we had, personally, longstanding relationships with that invited us to leave because they couldn't have us as clients. And then you go out and you have to raise money. And the only way you can raise money is through equity because there's no form of traditional debt or capital that's available to us. And so all the old school ways of capitalizing a business were out the window. You had to go raise money through equity, which was not easy to do when a lot of people looked at this and said, man, there's no way I'm going to touch that with a 10-foot pole. And then once you start operating it, your inability to accept any other form of payment except for cash or, cashless transactions through ATM or what have you, we take checks, we take cash, and then we do like this.
What does insurance? Can I assume that insurance won't cover if it's a cash transaction?
So, I mean, every single service that you as a business person in a traditional market would look at and say, I want to get 3 bids on this, and we're going to find, the lowest bid, and we're going to be price sensitive, this and the other. None of that exists in the cannabis industry. There's this thing that I call to the cannabis tax, right? Where people look at, like an insurance provider will look at us and go, cannabis. Yeah, well, your general liability, your premiums are going to be 300% greater than what a normal business would have, right? So all the costs are they ratchet up on top of each other.
But, okay, so I'm a patient. The doctor within your program convinces me, Jeff, here's the best thing for the seizures. Okay, I'm in, I'm all in. Doctor backs it up. Okay, how much?
Yeah, it depends. Depends on their.
So how much of the market, how much of the realistic market, patients in this state that I'm certainly not saying that you don't live with all day, every day, because I think when I mentioned the insurance, it looked like you've been punched in the stomach. How much of the market is priced out?
As a patient?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it could be a large amount.
Yeah.
Right. And here's why. It's not because of the pricing of our medicine. It's not that our medicine is expensive. If you compare our medicine to, let's say Epidiolex. Okay, Epidiolex is a FDA approved anti-seizure medicine that is CBD. Okay, and it is provided to people suffering from intractable epilepsy, from Dravet syndrome, and other forms of epilepsy. Okay, and it's covered by insurance. And the annual cost for a patient average on Epidiolex is approximately $35,000 a year. Okay. But it's covered by insurance, which means it's subsidized by you and I. Okay.
Yep.
Because we're federally illegal, we're not covered by insurance.
Yeah.
So, the sting that the patients feel isn't the $20 copay or the $10 copay, and then they get access to our medicine. It's that they got to pay out of pocket. And the annual cost for the same patient on our medicine relative to Epidiolex, maybe like $3,500, but it's still coming out of the patient's pocket. Instead of it being, $120, it's $3,500, but it ain't $35,000 either, right? And so that's where this thing kind of gets interesting.
Yeah. So can I assume I don't. This is complicated. Can we assume the insurance industry wants you to be legal federally? I mean, because this is a whole new market for them, or they want to keep it as is because their margins are going to be higher. What does the insurance industry want?
I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know. That may be one of the areas where we would bump into the pharmaceutical industry as a potential competitor, right? Because maybe they don't. Because that right there, look, if our medicine was covered by insurance, then I would be willing to bet that there would be a heck of a lot more patients that are participating. But
Sure.
they're priced out.
Is the legalization of recreational marijuana good or bad for you?
Look, any forward progress on this industry on a federal basis is a good thing for us.
Okay.
Right. It is. Where the question gets really interesting is then the impact on the regulatory environment in the state of Texas, right? Because each state in the U.S. is its own market, right? Meaning that Oklahoma has a different regulatory framework than Arkansas, than Louisiana, than New Mexico, than California, Colorado, and on and on and on, and certainly than Texas. Texas has chosen to be vertically integrated, which I think was a very smart decision, because it creates more value in the license beyond just the paper on which the license is written, right? For me as a business, because I do everything from seed to sale, meaning we have a cultivation operations where we grow. We have an extraction business where we extract and refine and process the medicine. We have a testing operation. We have a manufacturing and packaging where we put it into finished product. Then we have a retail organization. Then we have distribution, logistics, and fulfillment. So we've got really 6 different businesses that we operate all under one license. And so, not only that, but we've paid an awful lot of money in licensing fees to the state. And so we, in addition to just the fact that we want to operate a clean business, there's significant protective value in us doing things right. Whereas if you go to Oklahoma, if you have $200 in a heartbeat, you can get a license, and so it's kind of, it's a much different framework. And so, if the feds legalize it, they will likely say, we're going to leave it up to the states to decide how they want to regulate their own markets. And that's where it gets interesting for us.
But that seems counterintuitive. If it were legalized, which do you think recreational cannabis will be legalized in the state of Texas, and when?
Yes, I don't know.
Okay. So whenever that day, but wouldn't it, this is my point. Wouldn't you not want that? Because wouldn't the fear be, while more people would be using cannabis, theoretically more of them could try to self-medicate or try to figure out their way to self-medicate? Would it run off the people that are looking for medical advice and have them say, I heard it's good for, sort of like what's happened with COVID even. I've heard it's good for seizures. I'll try it.
Yeah, look, there's an argument to be made that, and there's substance that backs it up, that when a recreational market opens on top of a medical market, that the patients in the medical market get compromised because all the focus goes towards the recreational, because that's where the big dollars are,
okay,
right? And so there's truth to that because there's proof to that, right? I think it's highly likely that Texas is going to embrace adult use recreational anytime in the near future. The only thing that would drive that, well, there'd be 2 things that would drive that. One would be federal change, meaning that the federal perspective became, it's legalized throughout everything from a federal perspective. The second thing that would drive that would be a Democratic administration and legislature.
In Texas.
In Texas.
You want me to laugh now or just hold it in?
Well, no, that's why I'm saying it's not going to happen anytime soon.
Yeah, right. Okay,
right?
good. You filled in the blank. Okay.
I'm a realist.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
I'm an optimist, but I'm also
it was
it
was a very diplomatic way of saying nope, not happening.
Well, it's just, and look, we got into this because we believed in the power and the truth of the plant, right? And there's tremendous evidence and growing evidence that supports our initial belief. And you can even parlay that into the recreational market. And, our commitment has been to represent the patients and to fight on behalf of the patients and those that aren't patients today in order to expand the aperture on this industry in the state of Texas. And so our commitment is going to be to continue to serve those patients regardless of what happens.
If Beto ORourke were elected, would everything you just talked about change?
Well, if he's elected, it really depends on what happens in the lieutenant governor's seat, right? Because the governor, Governor Abbott has a lot to do with how this industry is regulated, right? The DPS, who's our regulator, who, by the way, has been a phenomenal collaborator and regulator, right? They have been, to a person at the DPS, they have been phenomenal. They've been professional and on top of things. And at the end of the day, they take direction from the governor's office. And the governor has, been very interested in this program. And he has learned a lot, I think, through his discussions with various legislators that are driving this agenda. And I think he's willing to expand and do more. So, even if he isn't in the governor's office and he's replaced with Beto ORourke, you still have the lieutenant governor, who is the most important person from a lawmaking perspective, most powerful person from a lawmaking perspective in the state of Texas.
Completely unrelated to cannabis and completely unfair. You were at AMD, right?
Yes, sir.
What the hell is the problem with the chips? What?
I don't know.
I mean, I know this is going to sound ignorant, but I think the average person is going, if I hear chips one more day, my head's going to explode. What's the problem, man? How did somebody not foresee, or why do we have a chip shortage? How did somebody not foresee that? There.
Well, you're talking about, it's not just a chip industry problem. This is a global supply chain problem. When you manufacture goods and services throughout the world, and those manufacturing facilities are shut down for weeks, if not months on end, and you don't have the workforce in order to manufacture, it doesn't matter whether it's a chip or whether it's a bottle of hot sauce, right? I mean, you're gonna have supply chain issues.
Okay. So when we hear, the cost of cars are up 40% as an example, we have a chip shortage. We need to make more chips. You're saying it's not about the ability to make chips or catch up with chips. It's that any plant has been offline for the most part of the last 2 years. Demand has stayed high, production non-existent.
Oh, I mean, look, it doesn't matter. The automobile industry is one great example that has been deeply impacted by a shortage of chips. The bicycling industry is one of the hardest hit from a supply chain perspective. Our industry.
But to be clear, it's not that we're not or incapable or not catching up with chips. You're just saying that any plant anywhere is offline. Any plant,
look, when you spool down a big operation, right? I mean, it takes months to spool that thing back up. And over the last 2 years, you've not had a steady access to reliable workforce. Or consistent operations, right? And that has nothing to do with the people. It has everything to do with the pandemic and the impact on that, right? And so it's extraordinarily hard. It is extraordinarily hard to make a product, because if you think about, the domino effect for us, right? Just to give you an example, we had a situation where we were running low on tapioca.
Oh, what?
Tapioca is tapioca. It's an important ingredient in our gummies. Okay. We were running low on it, and our supplier said we can't get it to you for 4 weeks, and which would have created a massive shortage for us. And so we scrambled. We found another tapioca supplier in Pennsylvania, but freight has also been deeply impacted, and we couldn't ship it from Pennsylvania to Austin within 2 weeks, right? And so what we had to do is, one of our guys, who's an absolute stud, volunteered. He goes, man, I'll fly to Pennsylvania, I'll rent a car, and I'll drive it back. So that's what he did. He hopped a plane on Sunday morning, flew to Pennsylvania, rented an SUV, drove to Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania, spent the night there, was at the dock at this tapioca manufacturer at 7 a.m. the next morning, loaded up 9 liters or whatever of tapioca into this SUV, and drove it 2 days back to Austin so that we wouldn't skip a beat, so that none of our patients would be out there medicine.
Do you have to refrigerate tapioca? How do you travel with tapioca? No? Okay. I was just curious. It better not be hot, right? If he goes and takes a nap in the middle of the day.
We didn't leave it up. He didn't take a nap in a rest stop and let it all heat up. That didn't happen. But I mean, it's crazy. The whole world, it's just like this ripple, man. The whole world is affected by, and it's not just, look, I mean, our day-to-day lives are all affected, but then all of a sudden you multiply that exponentially, and it'll be years before we're back to where we were pre-pandemic, just in terms of how this overall world of commerce moves.
Yeah. It's, I've wondered that. So, because the whole time, right, our demand and our habits haven't changed. I mean, whether we're getting it at home. What's that?
Yeah. They may have shifted a little. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, for some people, it may have shifted a little, but I mean, how we consume things is different, right? Like, I mean, I think one of the things that is an opportunity for us in the cannabis industry, I think that COVID is giving retailers, I'm speaking specifically about the retail game now, I think that it's given retailers permission to blow up the old school way of doing business. I mean, who would have thought that, you could get used to having curbside service for stuff, right? Where you don't even go into a store anymore, where your entire customer experience is either online or through the phone, or somebody delivering stuff and meeting you out at the car. Or when you walk in, already having your order set aside so you're in the least sort of trafficked environment that there is. COVID is giving retailers like us permission to completely think differently. And I think the folks that are willing to kind of lean into it and think a little bit further down the road are going to be really well positioned for moving forward in a different world.
What are your thoughts on going back to work and going back to the office or not going back to the office? Because it would seem, an amateur observation is, the one thing that I would think would never be the same. Well, business travel will never be the same. You can disagree, I guess. And office space will never be the same, correct?
I think both will never be the same.
Yeah.
I totally agree with that. I mean, one of the reasons why, like, WeWork had, a lot of problems and still faces a lot of problems is because the technology has gotten to the point where, look, we're having this conversation in real time because we're on Zoom and because the technology and the infrastructure allows for that to happen. We as a business can be very productive. In fact, my entire management team, we've got this little bitty office in a house, over on South Lamar. The house is like 1,500 square feet, and we'll congregate in there when we need to be in person. But the rest of the time, this is my home office, and I can organize and I can operate and we can run things just fine. People at the facility where we manufacture the product, where we grow the plants and where we do all the hard work, those folks have to be on site, right? So there's still a bunch of jobs that are out there that are going to require people to be in person. But, the way that we look at it is, you don't have to, I'm not expecting people to clock in, in the morning, and then I'm not making, I remember this guy I used to work for would, make his rounds in the afternoon around 4 or 4:30 and kind of look and see who was around,
Everybody has worked for that guy.
He called it his walkabout.
Yep.
And it was just like, oh, dude,
I know.
Really, and I look at it like, I know. I mean, you can feel it. You know when a person is contributing. We hold people accountable to the quality of their work, the consistency of their work, and their overall contribution. Man, if they can do that from the top of a volcano, great. Go for it.
But your logic and your way of going about it is applying across the board to practically any industry, right? I mean, we're not talking about just yours or just mine where you could sit in your underwear in your own made up studio. I mean, there's practically no industry that it doesn't apply to now, correct?
Well, again, the only industry where it would apply to that is when the workforce has to be on site, right?
Yeah.
And so there's a large number of those that are out there: manufacturing, construction, healthcare. I mean, dude, look at the healthcare industry. you want to talk about a collection of people that would love to be able to phone it in.
Yeah.
It's the nurses that are dealing with this right now.
Yeah.
And they can't. So there's still a lot of industries that require that on-site, in-person, presence. But for those where you can contribute remotely, I mean, look at the overall impact of commuting, sort of paying the 9 to 5. You got to get in the morning, get in your car, drive it, leave the house at 7, be at work by 8. Just the impact on our environment in terms of trying to own up to that kind of schedule. This is a great thing.
Yeah.
How this is evolving and how this is pushing this evolution.
Well, Morris, it's a great conversation. Congratulations. Keep it up. And thanks for the time.
Jeff, I appreciate you. Thank you for your time. Nice chatting with you, man.
All right.
Thanks for listening. You can find more episodes and all of our other Hot Pie Media originals baked fresh daily at our home online at hotpiemedia.com, the Hot Pie Media YouTube channel, or wherever you listen to podcasts.